Hello and welcome back to Round the Table, the slow TV radio podcast from the meeting point for students of English not only in Bilbao but throughout the world. And in a packed programme today, we've got some interesting words. We've got a prefix of the week. We've got quotations. And we've got phrases from this week's conversations. Our first phrase is set in your ways. When you are very used to doing things in a very habitual way and you don't like change and you're very comfortable in your way of life, we might say you're very set in your ways. It's not as negative as narrow-minded and those kind of phrases. It's a very pleasant way to describe someone who doesn't like change. They're set in their ways and unable to make changes. To make ends meet is a phrase that we use to describe your financial situation. It means making the money from one month last long enough to see you through to the next paycheck at the beginning of the next month. So we find it difficult to make ends meet is very similar to we find it difficult to get by. So it's referring to your financial situation. To be cut out for something. This is used to talk about what you feel you are made for and your appropriate position in life, let's say. So imagine if you're only 1.5 meters tall, you might not be cut out for being a basketball player. Other people might say, I'm not cut out for being a parent. If you think having children is not your thing, you might say, I'm not cut out for parenthood. Or imagine someone who became very famous and found it very difficult to be famous. You might say he's not cut out for fame. Okay, so it's what you feel you are made for. I'd give my right arm to be able to do something. So it's when you have a very strong wish, a very strong desire. You wish that you could do something and you would give anything. People say, I would give my right arm to play the piano like that. Which is a very silly thing to say, really, if you think about it. Decadent. I must put this word decadent in here because it's not exactly the same in English as it is in Spanish. The literal translation means the decline of something, the downfall. But in English, it's more referring to the cause of the downfall. So a decadent lifestyle is one that is very indulgent. You have a lot of luxury, and it's that luxury that means you're not concentrating on the important things in life because you're so busy listening to music and eating expensive meals and treating yourself in this world of luxury. So if somebody refers to a city as being a decadent city, it doesn't mean that it's in decline, like you might think it is. It actually means that people live a very luxurious life. That's what it means. We were talking about lofts and attics. To me, from British English, a loft and an attic is the same thing. It's the top part of a house, usually used as an extra storeroom. All the things that you don't really want them, but you don't want to throw them away, you put them up in the loft or you put them up in the attic. In modern context, a lot of people think it's a sort of a luxurious apartment at the top of a building. And this is because we've had things called loft conversions, where the top of the house, instead of being a storeroom, people have managed to make an extra room up in the top of the house. And now in America, in New York, you have these attic apartments or loft apartments. They're actually like old industrial buildings and warehouses. So it's got the idea of a very large open room, what I would call open plan design. So in American English, it's more to do with that luxurious apartment, whereas in British English, it's still the top part of the house that we use usually as a storeroom. And of course, when people lived at the top of the house, in the past, that was where all the poor people lived. All the servants lived at the top of the house because it was more difficult to walk up all those stairs. So it wasn't until the invention of the lift or elevator that then being up high was quite a prestigious thing. Before, the rich people didn't want to be on the top because it was too far to walk. So as soon as the elevator was invented, things changed. And by strange coincidence, the word lift and the word loft are actually connected because they both come from the Germanic meaning up in the air. And this is why the German airline is called Lufthansa. That Luft is the same as the lift and the loft. There's an interesting piece of etymology for you. And of course, those of you that were in class this week will know that in our book we didn't really have a topic for this week. We just had 2 pages of interesting quotations to look at. So let's have a quick look at the favourite quotation from this week. When you think there is no hope, remember the lobsters in the tank of the restaurant on the Titanic. I've been trying to find the author of this quotation, but I can't find it anywhere on the internet. But it's a very odd observation that the water inside the tank of lobsters is the same as the water outside the ship. It's a bit like one of those islands on a lake that's on an island in a lake. If you look on a map of Canada, you might find some. In Victoria Island, I think you'll find one of those. But anyway, the lobster observation was very popular this week, which led me to do a bit of research. Were there any lobsters on the Titanic? Yes, there were 700 or 800 lobsters on the Titanic, according to the records of the food that they took on board. 700 or 800 of them in large tanks of salt water. Would they have survived is the question. Probably not is the answer, because apparently they were European lobsters, which are not the same as North Atlantic lobsters. And also, as the Titanic went down, it went down to great depths, which means the water pressure would have been far too much for the lobsters to survive. So if they had escaped from the tank and managed to swim away, maybe there might be some lobsters out there now which are the descendants of Titanic lobsters. But it's not at all likely, I'm afraid. But an interesting thought nonetheless. Another thing that we were discussing this week was our concept of Oriental people and things like the Middle East. And surely this concept of East and West is a very Eurocentric idea. And of course, most maps, we see Europe in the middle. And, you know, the Chinese and Oriental countries are in the East and America's in the West. And we were wondering if that is the same for everybody. And apparently, if you go to Hawaii, Eastern countries are in the West. And the United States is in the East, but they still refer to it as the West, because it's just a cultural thing that's left over from European dominance in the world, that a lot of countries will refer to the East and West in the same way as we would. Even in the Middle East, even though talking amongst themselves in the Middle East, they have other ways of describing Arab nations and things like that. But generally, when they're talking on a world stage, as it were, they will still refer to it as the Middle East. And then I was thinking about the north-south thing and why maps always have the north at the top. And of course, it wasn't always so. The ancient Arab maps always had the east at the top because it's where the sun came up, and something to do with where Mecca was, which I suppose is only in the east if you are west of Mecca, so that doesn't seem to work. The reason it went with the north at the top, again, dominance of European sailors, and using the pole star, which is in the north, for navigation purposes. And then with the invention of the compass needle always points to the north, so then that reinforced the idea that the north was at the top. But it hasn't always been so, and apparently in old Chinese maps, the south was at the top of the page. So the north is only at the top because of tradition, and that's what we've become accustomed to, and now we are very set in our ways. And now this week I have a new word that I've learnt. Well, it's not really a new word, but it's a new concept of a use for a word, a kangaroo word. A kangaroo word is where there is one word hidden in another word. And with a true kangaroo word, the two words should have a similar meaning. So here's an example. Blossom. In the word blossom, if you take out the two S's, there is also the word bloom. They're both meaning a kind of flower. Blossom is normally on a fruit tree, on apple trees and cherry trees. They have blossom. And bloom means flower. Chicken has the word hen in it. Interesting. This word masculine has the word male. Then I found a couple more. These are quite rare things. Regulate. You can see the word rule inside there. Instructor. You can see the word. Can you see it? Tutor. And the word observe contains the word see. And apparently these kangaroo words are very rare because the two meanings of the word and the little word inside it have to have a similar meaning. They have to be similar. And it's called a kangaroo word, obviously, because of the way that the kangaroo carries the baby in a little pouch. A pouch like a pocket on the front. So it's a little one contained within the bigger one. If any of you can find any more kangaroo words, let me know in the comments down below. Now I think it's time we had an interesting word. The word blank in English obviously has a connection to the word blanc in French, which means white. But in English, it doesn't really mean white. If you have a blank piece of paper, it means there is nothing written on the piece of paper. So the piece of paper could be blue and blank at the same time. So that is a blank piece of paper. You can also have a blank expression. If you have no emotion showing, a blank expression, or you have no idea what somebody is explaining to you, you might have a blank expression. Bleach is connected. Bleach is a liquid that we often use for cleaning toilets and things, so it's a kind of disinfectant. But it also makes things white. If you accidentally splash some bleach on your clothes when you're cleaning the toilet, you'll see that it takes all the colour away, and that is why it's bleach. Related to blank, you see. You can also have sun bleached. If you spend a lot of time on the beach, you might notice that your hair changes colour. Your hair goes more blonde. Okay, that is because it is sun bleached. A lot of surfers look much blonder than other people, don't they? Bleak is related to bleach, which means pale, exposed, colourless. We often have a bleak landscape, meaning sort of cold and miserable. It's sort of exposed and windy. So a bleak landscape. And you can also have a bleak outlook. If the future you see the future in a very negative way, you could say the outlook is bleak. If you look at the economic situation at the moment with the troubles that are happening in the world, the future doesn't look too good economically. So we might say the outlook is bleak. Blanch is another word. In some literature, you might see he blanched when he heard the news, meaning he went white. Now that is very rare in normal use, but we do use it in cooking. When you put some vegetables in hot water for a very short time, it is to blanch. We use this French word, as most of our cooking words have French origins, to blanch. So if you want to take the skin off a tomato, you put it in very hot water, and then you take it out and you put it in very cold water. That is to blanch, and it is related to the word white. Another one that I've only just discovered is blanket, the thing that you put on the bed or on the sofa, or you use it to keep warm. The word blanket is from the same word for white, with a diminutive on the end, but originally it was cloth before it was dyed. To dye, in this context with the dye, is to change the colour of something, like you dye your hair or you can dye cloth, but a cloth in its natural state before there's any colour added is a kind of white colour. So that's the connection with blankets. That blank is also white. There you go, a whole load of interesting words related to the word blank. Now, something we've never done before, a prefix of the week. This is the prefix ill, which is when something is done in a bad way. So let's look at some examples of the ill prefix. It comes with a hyphen. Okay, it's unusual to have hyphens after prefixes, but here's an example. Ill-advised, when you've made a bad decision because your information was not necessarily enough or perfect. So an ill-advised decision would be a bad decision. Ill-informed means not well informed, really with not enough information. It's not the same as misinformed. If you had misinformed, that would definitely be the wrong information. Ill-informed is really not enough of it. You can also be ill-prepared if you're not ready for something, ill-equipped if you don't have the right equipment, ill-suited if it's not suitable for you or you are not suitable for it, ill-timed when you do something at the wrong time. You can also have mistimed as well. Ill-judged, ill-conceived, ill-mannered, which means bad-mannered, and ill-tempered, which means bad-tempered. So this ill prefix, often they exist with another prefix, like miss, for example. So you could misjudge something, would mean something very similar to ill-judge. And with some of them, like I found this one, ill-treated, not as common as mistreated, and there is a very rare one, maltreated. So ill, miss, mal, these prefixes in this word all mean the same thing. And I can't really see the difference between ill-treated, mistreated and maltreated other than how popular the words are. Most people would use mistreated, I think. But anyway, ill, there's a prefix that you might not have seen before. And this week, for some reason, we were discussing the vocabulary of funerals. The funeral is the ceremony after death, when somebody is buried usually. There is a cremation when the body is burnt, but this is not incinerate. Incineration is for rubbish and waste. A body is cremated. The grave is the hole in the ground, and it can also be an adjective meaning very serious. A tomb is similar to a grave, but it's something with some kind of structure over the top. And sometimes you get prehistoric tombs. And a tomb can also have more than one person in it. A grave usually only has one person, unless it's a mass grave, which sometimes you have in the case of war or disaster. A crypt is usually under a building. It's the sort of the basement of a church is the crypt. A cemetery is the place where people are buried. And note the spelling, there is no N in the middle of cemetery. Similar to the graveyard or the churchyard, these are the burial areas, but they are around the church, whereas a cemetery is a separate place that's specially for burying people. Graveyards and churchyards are normally around the church. The headstone or the gravestone is the marker for the grave, and it has somebody's name and the dates on there. The coffin or the casket is the box that they put the dead person in. That's a coffin or a casket. And the verb to mourn is when you are very sad after somebody dies. You are said to be in mourning, and the pronunciation is exactly the same as like morning afternoon, that kind of morning. Same pronunciation, but it's got a letter U in it. The epitaph is a written message that goes on the gravestone. So the vocabulary of funerals may be a little morbid, so let's discuss some epitaphs. Ludwig van Beethoven. He was everything, but we are nothing. That's rather serious. On the gravestone of comedian Spike Milligan, it says, "I told you I was ill." Mel Blanc, who was the voice of the Warner Brothers cartoons, he did the Bugs Bunny voice. Of course, his is, "That's all, folks." On the headstone of Dorothy Parker, it says, "Excuse my dust." On the gravestone of Karl Marx, "Workers of all lands unite." A political message even in death. Frank Sinatra, "The best is yet to come." I don't think so, Frank. On the gravestone of W.C. Fields, it says, "On the whole, I'd rather be in Philadelphia." I don't know what the reference to Philadelphia is there. Billy Wilder, "I'm a writer, but then nobody's perfect." And on the grave of television host Merv Griffin, it says, "I will not be right back after this message." This is because in America, when you have a television presenter and they have the break for the advertisements, they say, "We'll be right back after this message." But in this case, I will not be right back after this message. And then one that somebody told me this week, but unfortunately it's not genuine. I've tried to find it and it was suggested, maybe Groucho suggested it, but it didn't actually happen. Excuse me if I don't stand up. And this is a real one from Arizona, 1880, somebody called Lester Moore. He's not famous, but the gravestone actually exists. he was shot. It says, here lies Lester Moore, 4 slugs from a 44. Slugs refers to bullets, and 44 is the caliber, the size of the bullet. Then it says, no less, no more. So Les, you see, is his name, Lester. So they spelt Les with 1 S. And no more because his surname is Moore. So no less, no more. So there you have a whole load of very amusing epitaphs for our vocabulary of funerals. And that's about all we have time for this week. Don't forget to leave comments and click the like button, and please share this podcast with all your friends if you could. It would do me a great favour. Next week we're discussing the topic of misunderstandings, so I look forward to seeing you all down at the meeting point, and if I don't see you there, have a good week. Till next week.